3, 2, 1. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of CriminalCast, an Unnamed Indie Comics Show production. This is episode 6, featuring the second Reckless edition. This one is Friend of the Devil. Joining me are my fellow criminals, Skip and Tosh, Eric Breen, and Nalo. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me tonight for our CriminalCast. How you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty fine. It's kind of a first summer evening in my yonder part, so getting the energy flowing.
Oh, I hate. I'm getting tired of summer. As you get older, summers aren't as good anymore. What about you guys?
They're quite good right when after a pandemic ends, and you can go outside.
I guess there's that, but. Eric, how you doing, man? How's Kentucky?
I'm good. I'm looking at there's now two of them are showing up on your feed here, and I'm trying to figure out which one I should be watching.
There's only one that's live. The other one's canceled.
Well, yeah, a conversation between me, Jimmy, and Joe disappeared.
Yeah, I had to cancel that because of the errors.
Oh, okay.
That's gone.
I thought maybe you canceled because I besmirched Jim Lee again.
Well, you know, what are you gonna do?
Besmirch him a third time?
Speaking of Kentucky, yeah, got myself a nice bottle of some Kentucky bourbon. Maker's Mark 46. I love this stuff. Skip, how are you doing tonight?
Doing all right. Just doing my basketball thing, and there's some really important games on tonight. But who needs to watch the Warriors beat up the Lakers, your sworn enemy, when you can come and talk about Ed Brubaker books along with Sean Phillips and the Phillips boy, the son of the Phillips.
All right. Yeah. I mean, who needs basketball?
Right.
Who needs sports? We just need to all sit around, drink and get fat, talk about comics.
I think I've been doing a pretty good job of that lately.
I kid, of course. I kid.
I don't. I stepped on the scale today and I was like, ooh, we need to play more basketball. And most of my money is gone because I went and bought comics. And I'm sitting around and I may or may not have a shot next to me. So I'm pretty much checking all of your boxes, my man.
Oh, you got a shot? What you got a shot of?
To kill you.
To kill you? Oh, that's my bag. What kind you got?
Oh, I don't even know. It's like some cheap
actual tequila.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just rubbing alcohol. It's just a shot of pure gasoline.
Rubbing alcohol.
I have.
Go ahead, Eric, man.
I was gonna say I have some Tequila 29.
Tequila 29 is in the house. Welcome to Helam. I apologize if there's some confusion. I'm kind of drawing this out a bit. I had a stutter start YouTube with the original launch. I had to cancel the stream and relaunch it. I tweeted out the new thing on Twitter. If anyone else wants to share, that would be handy. I'm sure there's gonna be some people confused me, like, what's going on? Why is this canceled? It's not canceled. We should be running live. So if you're here, then you know. Unfortunately, I probably should go into back channels and delete that off of the YouTube thing so it doesn't show up in people's feeds. That's why I need you guys to pick up my slack. What's the point of having wingmen? Sorry. No, tell me how you guys are doing, man. I haven't seen you guys in like a week.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing cool. It was good. We had a indie comic show and wrapped up at East to West, and pretty much just been buying comics, reading comics, playing basketball, watching basketball. That's pretty much been it. All right. I bought Nalo volume 2 of Criminal hardcover because he was having a hard time getting one, and I just happened to see it today. So Nalo, that thing is going to be on its way soon, man. I'm pretty excited for you. It does have the criminal story from the Dark Horse
I'm
noir.
excited about that because I found out about that Dark Horse book from you. I bought it on a whim at Barnes and Noble, so it's like
Uh,
the highest price possible for a book,
oh
And
dang!
I was so thin, and I was just like, okay, I read the 3-page criminal story.
Like either one better than the other. I guess the only thing I like about the hardcover version is obviously it well, I don't want to say obviously, it is larger, the larger hardcover, so the panels are a little bigger. So me and Nalo get to drink those in.
Yeah, so as for me, I'm doing well. I kind of given up on comics that are new. Not that
What?
many I'm into foreseeable months, but I've been buying some omnibuses, Ether and Mind Management from Matt Kint, and I just got East of West Year 3 delivered just a few hours ago. So
Oh, say it
doing
ain't
some
so.
collecting.
Nice.
Say it ain't so. I hate to hear it. Is this just because of comic book shop issues?
I don't know. I opened a pull at the new shop near me. A bunch of ones I put on it got delayed for a long time. Decorum, like a Rom V book. So I'm gonna get Batman, Swamp Thing, and a few Image books, but I might not be rushing to get them, and it's not that many on the list. So.
Well, fortunately, you got Reckless, Friend of the Devil, and the next one will be out in October. Looks like they're doing a 6-month release cycle, which is it's pretty good. If you figure each of these books is about 6 comics in length, approximately, so it's almost like it's about the equivalent of just waiting for the trade. if you just pretend that floppies are coming out every month and then you're just getting the trade at the end, it's about the equivalency. I kind of like it because I don't feel guilty not picking up the floppies. So I find it difficult to wait for trades. What about you guys?
I'm
Yeah.
fine. Go ahead.
I don't respect the format of trade paperbacks.
You don't respect the format?
Like, I don't want to own them in any way, shape, or form. I don't have
Really?
room for them. I don't want them.
But you have more room for floppies?
Well, yeah. I mean, technically, I could put these trade paperbacks in like a short box, but otherwise, I'd rather just have hardcovers or floppies.
Oh, I mean, that's kind of what I mean when I say trades. You just don't like soft
Oh yeah,
cover.
I just mean like I wouldn't buy like East of West Volume 1, East of West Volume 2, East of West Volume 3. Maybe other people would. I just personally don't have like the space or interest in like those 6-issue trades.
Okay. So if CriminalCast were coming out in floppies, you would just get it that way instead? I'm sorry, not CriminalCast. Reckless.
Yeah,
I'm looking at
yeah,
the
yeah.
CriminalCast thing.
Yeah, I would. I appreciate those extra essays and tidbits in the back.
Cool. Man, YouTube's just giving me all sorts. I'm trying to delete their other stream. So whatever YouTube. It's not like you're just the biggest freaking tech company in the planet. All right, well, I think without further ado, we can get this party started. I think everyone's come here to read some, to hear about some Reckless. I hope you guys in the audience have got to read the book too. We're not just here to spoil things. I hope you guys all have a nice beverage in hand. Eric, what are you drinking? Diet Coke or Coke Zero as always?
Coke Zero.
Nice. You're not going to switch over to Pepsi Zero due to the controversies?
No, if I didn't drink, eat, or consume stuff because of stupid woke BS or because of boycotts, as a conservative, all I'd have is Toby Keith music and Goya foods.
Spoken like a true criminal. All right, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's book is Reckless, It's book 2. It's kind of a weird thing. I'm not sure what they're doing. It's a sequence of books. I haven't really seen anyone do this before. I'm sure it has been, but they're all original hardcovers. There's no floppies, but it's the same character in the same town with all new stories. You don't have to read the first one to read the second one. You can read them in any order you wish if you want. It's kind of like the Criminal series in that way. This one is called Friend of the Devil, and the little back blurb reads as follows. Meet Ethan Reckless. Your trouble is his business for a price. A former 60s radical and undercover agent, Ethan is one part repo man, one part private eye, and one part wrecking ball. Now it's 1985, and things in Ethan's life are going pretty well. Until a missing woman shows up in the background of an old B movie, and Ethan is drawn into Hollywood's secret underbelly as he hunts for her among the wreckage of the 70s. So, with all that, I'm going to let Nalo take it away and get this party started. And we're going to discuss some Reckless by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips.
All right. Well, to the contrary of that synopsis, I don't think things are going that well for Ethan Reckless when we meet him. It seems to be a theme in these Reckless books that they open up kind of at a scene towards the end of the story when Ethan is kind of been reckless and ending up in some sort of danger, and then kind of winds back the story. So we see that in volume 2 that we saw in volume 1. And when it is 1985, it doesn't seem like things are going that well. And kind of the tone and vibe of this book kind of matches the tone and vibe they're trying to capture of the 1985. It's kind of described as like a massive hangover from the 70s of creativity, hippies, etc., and kind of just filled with Duran Duran and empty promises of cocaine or something to that effect. And Ethan seems to be kind of caught up in that malaise and just going through the motions. And so his assistant really encourages him to take a case. He's a private investigator, or not even a private investigator, just a guy who helps people solve problems. And it's just one of your run-of-the-mill cases, so you kind of get to see what he's been doing since we last saw him about 10 years ago, maybe. Still just odd jobs. And the job that he picks up is to find a guy who basically ditched his family and made a new identity and started a new family. And it's a pretty boring job, but he meets kind of a librarian along the way, a woman named Lynn. And he solves that case pretty easily, but he just still feels lost and unfulfilled. And he goes back to tell her, I caught the guy. And she's like, oh, wow. And then they kind of hit it off, start dating or hooking up and just chilling. They seem like they both just need each other to kind of recover from this dark mid-'80s time period. And they start watching kind of movies. Ethan's been buying some sort of movies he's after, but they come in boxes with random movies. So they're just watching some random B movie. I think it was called The Sirens of Saturn. And this Lynn woman is like super chill. He's super infatuated with her. She just wants to like watch movies, like sleep together at night. And then she just freaks out because she sees her sister or adopted sister or she's adopted this beautiful blonde woman as a B actress in a film, and freaks out because she had disappeared or run away from home a number of years ago. And this kind of just sets Ethan off on a trail into the underbellies of Hollywood and finding out what happened to her, the kind of dark side of snuff films, cults, the underbelly of LA. Kind of reminded me of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to some extent. And so this book is about the friend of the devil and kind of touching on some evil, dark stuff that lurks underneath and maybe was buried after the crazy period of the 70s. And yes, that's kind of where Ethan takes him and how he kind of winds up in a pseudo skinhead Satan cult that's been reinvented after the 70s and works on solving the case. I was left with kind of a strange taste in my mouth. Kind of maybe that was the intention because the mid-'80s is described as so kind of hazy and hungover and dark. But I think this was still a kind of memorable book and achievement, but it's kind of hard for me to really process. So I'm going to kind of pause there, turn over to you guys, and maybe we can just say in general what we thought of the book, high level. Skip, what did you think of the book?
You touched on a lot of good points. I definitely got the vibe of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood from the perspective of someone who enjoys reading Brubaker books, since me being here. I did get the closest I think we've gotten to The Fade Out, which is my favorite Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, Elizabeth Breitweiser collaboration. But personally, as someone who grew up with a parent like in law enforcement and studying to be like in the FBI and stuff like that, like cults and like kind of that time period mixed with my enjoyment of like old Hollywood, like underbelly, and normal like vanilla studio production, like history and background and all of that stuff. It hit a lot of like my even nerdier like niche interests and kind of like threw them all together in Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips flask and shook them up, and I got to take a big old shot of it. How did you feel about some of this, Breen?
Well, I say as the one of us that was actually at least chronologically an adult in the 80s. Um, the 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 overall feel of the 80s wasn't dark. It was kind of, after the first couple years, it was pretty much a party for the rest of the decade. So leave it to Ed Brubaker to find, the dark spots that most of us didn't, come across. But
Well,
yeah,
most of the dark stuff that happens in this book happens in the 70s, right?
well,
They're just investigating it later.
right, but it's still, he paints a pretty bleak picture of where Ethan is, currently too. Once the case gets down to the nitty gritty, at least that's the way it felt to me. But and again, I don't know where Ed Brubaker lives, but I promise you, when he walks out to the front door to get the paper 365 days a year, the sun is never shining.
And no, to back that up, I mean, that's literally the first page. 1985 was a bad year. So even the title of the very first page and that like part of it kind of sets that up. Nalo had kind of quoted some of it, but the first panels are right here. When I think of the mid 80s, I mostly think of all the bad drugs and music I never thought we'd be stuck listening to for the rest of our lives. So like even like poking fun of like the music, like not liking the music, thinking that it's worse than the period that they came out of. That's kind of where Ethan is internally in the whole of this time period of 1985.
I did get the sense that the narration part is written from the perspective of 30 years.
It is.
Yeah.
85.
And
So
Skip,
kind of
what
from the
happened was,
perspective of maybe living through it, it seemed glossy and party-like, but in retrospect, the 80s maybe looks kind of
I
dark.
actually really identified with this part. I mean, I didn't grow up as an adult in the 80s. Obviously, I was very much a kid in the 80s, but it helped to find my life. And the music that he mentioned, Depeche Mode, I'm not really a Duran Duran guy, but I'm a big Depeche Mode fan. The music of that time period, when I was listening to it, I was like, yeah, I still listen to it today. I don't really listen to much new stuff. I do listen to new stuff, and I'm probably more open than most people my age. But you do find yourself kind of stuck into the music of your formative years and your early adult life, and the 80s and 90s for me. And I don't know, I just related to this really well. Like, I just didn't think about it then, but now, in listening to this guy talk about 30 years of the past, I felt a little bit of me in there.
well, it turns out that Ethan had a Spandau Ballet tape stuck in his cassette player. And he didn't know that CD players were going to come along and fix that.
That's funny because that like connects me to another noir book, kind of criminal crime book that I'd read a little bit last year, but the show came on last year. It was Stumptown, and that's the very first thing that's like a recurring theme in there. Like she has no money and she's got this tape from like with a bunch of 80s music stuck, and sometimes the tape player turns on out of nowhere, and then out of nowhere it'll just stop when she's like enjoying it. So making connection to more noir / detective criminal books out there.
Okay, so Ash, what did you in general though feel about the book?
For me, it was I was taken aback a little bit by this book.
Me too.
And I think it's because I brought some baggage in with me. And I don't mean that in like in as bad as it sounds kind of way, but I'm kind of new to Brubaker. I haven't read quite as many of the books as you guys and maybe people in the audience have, but I've read enough now that I at least feel like I kind of, I know what Brubaker does. I know what his bag is. And so I kind of went in expecting more of the same. Brubaker tends to throw lots of twists, and especially the last book we featured was Cruel Summer, right? And Cruel Summer was just all over the place, not in a chaotic way, but just like there was so much going on and different characters and just bouncing around, and it really took you on this wild ride, and I loved it. And so that's kind of what I like about Brubaker. And so I went into this kind of was like, yeah. And this story was really straightforward. It was Ethan and this girl, was her name Trin? Is that her? Lynn Tron. And his investigation into the death of her sister, who died, 8 years prior. And it's really straightforward. There's not a huge cast of characters, which I'm just kind of used to. I'm used to like, oh, go here, then boom, we're born here, then oops, you do a U-turn, go around, and it's just this big wild ride. And here, Brubaker just took us on a very straightforward story, which isn't a bad thing. I was just not prepared for it. One thing I do love, though, I love that Brubaker is a child of Southern California and San Diego in particular. And I don't know what Sean Phillips is, because obviously he's doing the illustration. But I mean, I just feel like, oh yeah, this was my childhood. Like I can see like places and landmarks and things in the book, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. That's a subjective thing for me that I just get a little bit of a grin because it's my neck of the woods. I read lots of stories of other parts of the world and stuff, and I'm just like, oh, okay. But here I feel like, yeah, it's my hometown. And he seems to capture things right. But yeah, this is a interesting book. I'm used to the whole criminal thing too, and this whole Reckless feels more like it feels kind of like an adult version of Magnum PI. Is that fair to say?
I could see those parallels.
Like Magnum PI was Dirty Harry. Type, like
that's a little closer.
Dirty.
Like he's a private investigator, and it has sort of the exoticness. I mean, I know San Diego's not as exotic as Hawaii, but what I'm saying, the setting, everything, he's just got that surfer attitude. He's not like your normal guy, and that's the correlations I get. But Magnum, of course, is very TV friendly. This is very what was that? What was Bronson? Who was in the 80s? They did those Vengeance.
Pierce Brosnan, the Remington Steel?
No, he did all the Vengeance movies in the 80s.
Oh, Charles Bronson.
Charles Bronson. Yeah, like this is like a Charles Bronson film meets Magnum PI. It feels like to me, and I really like it. It's and the afterward, Ed talks about how he grew up in some of his life in San Diego, and his dad was in the military and different things, and he read Helter Skelter as a kid. He found the book Helter Skelter, which is about or was it the book that inspired Manson? I forget, but definitely the Manson murders is a very big inspiration of this book. And he talks about like the pulp novels, which I'm kind of a fan of. I love that. And just those heroes that were in those type of novels, which were like Charles Bronson characters. Like Eric probably knows, like the Destroyer. Did you ever read Destroyer books?
I didn't read any of them, but I have some in the garage.
There we go. So that was my think. I think this is a book I'm going to need to revisit because of that. I very much enjoyed the book. Brubaker's a master writer. I just wasn't prepared for such a straightforward approach, and I kept expecting things that didn't happen. Looking for, and I was like, oh wow, I just went straight forward. Okay, and it's made me a little bit like, huh. But it's still a fantastic book. That's my thoughts.
I have a little bit of a different take on this.
Let's hear it.
Well, first I have to say the one thing that I knew was going to happen, and it turned out that it was exactly as I thought. Since it was a Brubaker book, you knew damn well that the girl that they were looking for was dead. There was no happy conclusion to that. one of the things that when I read a Brubaker book, whether it's one I've read before or pulp or even the first Reckless book, I kind of become what is referred to as being a prisoner of the moment, and by which I mean I say, "Oh, this is the best Brubaker book I've ever read." I did not get that this time.
Me neither.
I read this and I said, "It's Brubaker and it's good." Now that might be a preconceived notion. There might not be. I don't know. Gabby Rivera could probably write something and sign it at Brubaker, and I'm going to like it. But this,
well, I mean, you do
if I
consider her an icon, American
no national treasure. Yes, get it right. Or she will come to your house. And use bad Spanglish. I read this, I enjoyed it, but I thought I can pretty much safely say that even if I read this again, something is of all the Brubaker stuff, something has to be the one I like the best, something has to be the one I like the least. And this probably goes into a competition with Fatale because I just the subject matter of Fatale was the least interesting to me of what he writes. That's not a knock on this book. It's just this didn't I didn't find this as riveting as the criminal stuff or as compelling as pulp. And I'm not saying I was disappointed by it, but I also wasn't blown away by it.
Yeah, I think you were actually kind of saying what I was trying to say. I guess I wasn't very eloquent.
No, I knew I was just adding my own 2 cents, and it just happened to be
I appreciate it because
from the same nickel.
I
see what I did there.
Nice.
Really, nothing. Really, I'm going home.
Oh wait, no, I agree. This I am with you. Every time you say how you live in the moment, and every Brubaker book is like the best one, and you read the next one, it's because while you're reading it, you're so impressed. That's how I feel too. Each time I read, this is the first time where I read it, and I was like, okay, this is clearly not the best one I've read. It's clearly I didn't like it as much as even the previous Reckless book. But I hesitate to talk like that because I don't want people who haven't read the book. A lot of people, when they hear that sort of like, that sort of, they feel like, oh, it's not that good. That's not the case at all. That's like saying, compared to Empire Strikes Back, original Star Wars isn't that great. No, they're both fantastic. It's just, there's A plus and then there's just A. Like this is a solid book. By any stretch of the imagination, this is still better than 95% of what is out there that I read in comics.
Definitely.
It's just that Ed Brubaker set such a high bar. One of the things I just was thinking about listening to you guys talk about it is every time I read at least for me, I haven't read as much as you guys. Every Ed Brubaker book I've read always features like new characters. So, unless it's like, oh, we're going back to their childhood or something. But so each time I'm reading a book, you're getting some character development, getting to know who this character is. So like in the first Reckless book, you're getting to know who Ethan Reckless is. And that's a fascinating part of the story. In this book, there's not as much characterization. I don't know if Ed was expecting you to just be sort of like, oh, you already read the first one, so you kind of know who this guy is. But they did not go into the character development nearly at all compared to like the first one. And while the plot has nothing to do with the first book, you could read this book and you don't need to know what happened in the first book. You won't get the character development of Ethan in the same way. Do you guys feel that way?
I do.
No, just pretty strongly actually.
What's that, Nala? You agree or?
I disagree pretty strongly actually.
Okay. What's your perspective?
What I was trying to jump in there for a few minutes, was I kind of agree with everyone's take that, while I was reading this, and when I finished it, I didn't feel, oh, this was the best in the moment book. And I just kind of feel there's maybe in the time we have left something deeper we could unpack. And on the points of characterization, I think something to focus on is what we learn about Ethan is maybe a few things. Like one, why was he so insistent on pursuing this case when, he basically knew the woman was dead and every single red flag kept popping up to turn back, and there's nothing really to gain here. We learn how he potentially, used his FBI training to, escape dangerous situations. And like three, I think maybe there's more characterization or philosophical things to discuss since it was such a straightforward plot in terms of like, what was actually found and out, what happened to the woman, and what are the implications with that, and things like that. But yeah, basically that's where I see like characterization or something to consider of like why did this reckless guy even end up in this situation, and then what does it even mean about in regards to what he found, and and you learn at the end that he then decides to kind of go on some kind of like psycho vengeance manhunt to murder a bunch of people. So I think it added a lot to the character myself.
No, I was saying to what Ash was saying that you didn't. Brubaker, I think, expected readers of this book to have read the first one, and I would think that 90+% of the people that read this book have already read the first one because it is the second chapter of this story. So I think I didn't have a problem with him not going back and and touching on some of the other stuff. I thought something in addition to all the things you mentioned, Nalo, I liked the camaraderie between Ethan and his old handler. That their relationship seemed a lot more pleasant, for lack of a better term, than it was in the first one, because time has passed. He does kind of think of him. I got the feeling that guy kind of thinks of Ethan as kind of like a son. When he comes in, like even the line about did you bring the pastrami?
That was a great line.
And he goes, "No, I'm afraid of your wife." "Oh, you prick." And then the wife says, "Thanks for keeping him busy." I thought that's probably the most human scene I've ever read in a Brubaker book.
Yeah. And to be clear, and this is why I was hesitant to talk about that particular subject matter, was it's not that I don't think that there's characterization, but the things that you mentioned, like they talk about, like he's using his FBI training. Brubaker sort of just kind of mentions it off the cuff, like, hey, I use my FBI training to do this. Where in the first book, there's a lot of explanation about how he has this background in the FBI and what it was. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a little bit more glossed over on this one, as if we're expected to read. Now, I don't necessarily mind that either. If this is book 2, you're supposed to read book 1. All I'm saying is that I think part of the reason it didn't make quite an impact is because I like these discovering who characters are. I think an origin story, at least for me, is very fascinating, and you can only do that once, right? You can only do like Batman Year One time. once you told that story where he comes from.
DC that.
Yeah, nice. So I'm just sort of thinking out loud that maybe part of the reason it didn't make quite as an impact as me, because I already know this character. For the most part. I mean, I'm learning new things. This book did teach me new things about the character, but he's not a blank canvas. Comparatively, when I read Lawless, I'm like, who the hell's Tracy Lawless? I don't know. In this book, I'm going to find out. And so there's a fascinating ride there. I don't have that this time, where it's like, who's Ethan Reckless? I already know. I read the first book. So I'm not trying to slight the book in any way. I'm just trying to maybe find a rationale of why this particular one wasn't quite as amazing as other works.
Yeah, so Skip, you said that this book has slightly reminded you of The Fade Out, which is also LA and kind of the underbelly of Hollywood and things that go on at sketchy parties. What did you think of the kind of occult, secret society elements of this book?
I felt like it kind of in a way like built on that portion of Brubaker's writing and his interests, like in that part of Hollywood's history. In The Fade Out, we have like sets and stuff like that get explored for different things, and then here it was like a similar thing, how they were like using sets, but they this group, the the wow, why did I not write the name down? The Church of the Fallen. It had like gotten its talents, so to speak, inside of a B movie level producer and director, and from there like garnered so much influence within him that he was allowing them to like use sets to do some of like their ritualistic, almost snuff film style like videos slash propaganda that they were making. So yeah, I liked that there were some of those parallels there, but they were discovered excuse me, they were explored in a different way, where you have the fade out. It more is on that side of something wrong happened, but like this is very much more like an innocent person trying to figure out like what happened, so to speak, where this was like, oh no, this is definitely like some totally wrong, messed up, like crazy creepy occult stuff happening. And that alone implies that there could be a lot bigger of an effect once you get to the root of what all of those things were that were occurring.
Yeah, so to the theme of this not being my favorite Brubaker book, but the more I'm thinking about it, the more I think it is extremely well done and kind of touching on some stuff that maybe isn't that dopamine triggering in terms of being along for the ride, but has some pretty serious elements. I think what stands out to me is this juxtaposition of the 70s to the 80s, and how even the photographer he meets is just like, oh yeah, chuckles, like it was such a wild time back then, like we're civilized now, like, and thinks it's even just okay to like laugh it off like it was a memory or a dream. Right. And just kind of how I had all these opinions in the previous Reckless stream about the colors. It was LA. It reminded me of this Inherent Vice film I mentioned with directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, like weed-filled noir. And this just left me feeling bleak, and I almost feel like it's intentional. And if that's the case, then it's a really job well done. Not that I want to feel that way necessarily, though.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there was a little bit of Brubaker putting himself not into the characters but into the book, his life experiences, which is what good writers do. But Brubaker's, he's been around Hollywood, he's produced stuff. Obviously he grew up around Southern California. He talks about like how he, as a kid, he read Helter Skelter and it gave him nightmares. You can see that he takes things from his life and he puts it in these books. And I'm just kind of wondering if that bleakness that you're feeling, which I kind of feel too, is sort of his way of expressing sort of that Hollywood kind of still is this way. Like it's this decadent, screwed up, inhuman world that people get trapped into, and you're lucky if you make it out alive.
Well, yeah, I would agree, because I would say that's more people's experience, than the success stories in there. It's just, again, it's Hollywood, so they have to project and present the success to continue to be alluring to people. If it was more revealing what most people's fate is that go and try their hand at that lifestyle, a lot of people would stop going. Some people might even leave, and that would
did you guys
take
hear
away from
about
them.
the issues with Brubaker in Hollywood recently?
No.
So it came out that he earned more from having a cameo in one of the MCU films than any sort of royalty for the Winter Soldier.
Oh yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I did hear about the Winter Soldier thing about not getting the royalties, but I mean that's been corporate comics since the beginning, right? I mean, Siegel and Schuster. I mean, look at the war that had to be fought for those guys to just even get some credit for Superman. How we
and I can
Kirby and
yeah, and I mean, and I think that's part of the travesty, is that all these years later, and it's still the case. Like it hasn't changed enough, and I can completely see Brubaker like taking inspiration from that and putting it into the story, but not so much that it's a bullhorn for that, but does use it more as a creative source for his creation, as opposed to him being on on a pedestal or whatever you want to say, kind of taking us out of the story. But I could definitely feel those sentiments like within the book. And again, he's not just speaking for himself. Like that's been, like Ash said, that's been so many people's experience. And even like Siegel and Schuster and Kirby and all that. Again, they ultimately had some sort of success. And I think that's part of the travesty. They had so much success and they still got the short end of the stick. But imagine the people that have no type of success. They end up a lot more close to, like Lynn's sister, where it's so far down the rabbit hole that they're getting sacrificed in a snuff film for, these occultists.
Yeah. What about the Marilyn? I always say Marilyn Manson. It's really crappy that their freaking singer's more famous, and so, took the Manson name, Marilyn Manson.
Charles Manson.
Yeah, just did it again. I can't. Charles Manson. Did you feel that? Did you feel that influence, or was I the only one that?
No, it was definitely there. He even named him in the book.
That's what I was saying about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is a Charles Manson film.
Oh, see, I haven't seen that movie yet. So, would you guys say this book, and if you liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you should read this, or vice versa?
Yeah, there's definitely more than enough there. I mean, they literally like get named in that movie. They literally get name dropped in this book, and there is that influence on both sides. The two pieces of art are different enough to where I wouldn't say you would automatically like the other, but if you more particularly like if you have interests in those things, old timey, Tinseltown no culture, and like the and like kind of crime element, like murder, true crime type stuff, then both of these are going to wet that whistle.
Yeah, so for me, Reckless Book 1 is like Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice, and Reckless Book 2 is like Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yep.
All right, I need to see both of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys want to do like a group stream where we can pull up the film and just keep going?
I'm down.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that after the stream.
Yeah, so Skip, you mentioned just the snuff aspect, and I'd like to hear all your guys' thoughts about this. About what does that really mean to you in the story? And I wanted to introduce what it meant to me. I'll take a quick poll. How many of you are familiar with the play Hamlet?
Yeah.
Very minorly. I tended to avoid Shakespeare when I can help it.
Breen?
I just have basic knowledge.
All right. Well, there are these random ass characters in Hamlet called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. I think they're like Hamlet's fake friends, and his like mom organizes for them to like visit him. And they're in the play, very, very little amount. And like everyone dies at the end of Hamlet, and then like some messenger also arrives, and like the last lines of the play are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. And in the 60s, this guy, Tom Stoppard, I believe, came out with like this absurdist play called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. And so all the lines that they have in Hamlet, they have in this play, but they have very little lines in Hamlet. And so the rest of the play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, is like when they're just sitting in some sort of blank space, and they're like, how did we get here? And they're like, we don't know. And then like when it's like their turn to be in the play Hamlet, they're in Hamlet, and then otherwise they're just like exist off stage. And some sort of traveling troupe of like absurdist peoples appear. I think they also are in Hamlet, so like they somehow meet up off stage, and they're kind of like conniving and mischievous. And the one thing I remember that this troupe, and the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, it's like an existential book. They're always like, and they die at the end of the play, so they're always just like, where are we? What's going on? I think we're gonna die. What do we do about it? But this troupe that shows up, like they have this thing where they like show them that when they kill someone for real on stage, they don't die very well. Nobody likes it in the audience. And so people only like fake deaths, like dramatic ones. Mm-hmm. And like they just do it a lot. I don't know why in this play that they just like kill people for real. And then like their plays get bad reviews because the people die poorly because the audience doesn't know that they actually get killed. And it kind of just triggered that memory of that play to me about this, watching someone die, and it's really like in this even snuff film, kind of boring. It's not very dramatic, and the kind of difference between like entertainment death that's fake and how watching someone die for real is really like not great.
Yeah.
I think there was a good bit of commentary that I took away about sort of the desensitiz. God, that's a hard word to pronounce.
Desensitization, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was. You just summed up my whole ramblings.
In one
It's
word
like
that I can't
everyone
pronounce.
is so sensitized to death, desensitized to death in the play that when they actually kill people on stage, no one bats an eye.
Well, they talk about here how like these rich Hollywood types, they in this cult that he talks about how he gets people to follow him, the leader of this Satan cult, the Magus. And he says that he basically preys on their desires, and he basically gets them to admit, like, hey, if God, put these desires in you, how can they be bad? And and gets people to give in to their impulses and say basically like, why should you hold back? You should just be able to do whatever you want. Basically, it's a plea towards hedonism, which you could feels like a commentary towards modern society, because that's where society's going again today. Very hedonistic, just about self-pleasure and not caring about others. And the problem is once you have things and you're satisfying those pleasures, eventually you get bored of them. No matter what it is in life you do, it's funny, I was picking up my friend's kid from school today, and we were driving, and she was like, man, I can't wait till I can drive and all this stuff. And I was talking about, I was like, yeah, I was reminiscing when I was a kid and how like when I was 16, I got a car, and it was like the most amazing feeling. Like, oh, but how driving today is like, it's almost like a chore sometimes. I'm just like, I don't want to drive somewhere. But when I was 16, any excuse to drive. You need me to go get groceries? I'll drive, because it was this new thing. It was exciting, but eventually things get dull, and that seemed like a commentary of how you just need to escalate and escalate. And it was like, that's what was happening. And to the point where you're like literally like killing people to satisfy these pleasure centers in your brain. And you just become so numb to everything else. And I don't know. I think there was a bit of commentary. Maybe I'm reading too much into it.
So you're saying you want to drive a bulldozer?
Yeah, that'd be fun, wouldn't it? I've never done it.
You could go pick up your friend's kid from school in an earth mover. How cool would that be?
Amazing. But you know what I'm saying? I'm sure like there's probably professional bulldozer drivers that are just like just get me out of this thing. I don't want to ever see one of these again. They're probably
Man, I wish I was home reading a Brubaker book.
Right. So I don't know. I feel like Brubaker makes a lot of commentary about society in his books. Sometimes very subtle, sometimes pretty obvious. And it's interesting how to use the 70s and reflect on things like today. The way he uses the skinheads in the book, and he talks about how they're just spoiled rich kids that are so bored they got nothing to do, so they go lead these crazy lifestyle. And the first thing that came to my mind was Antifa. I was like, yeah, Antifa kind of is like the skinheads of the early 80s. Wow.
Well, there's one difference.
What's that?
The skinheads were never lauded by a political party for doing good work.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, they're not carbon copy, but
yeah, because skinheads were pretty much universally reviled, but I get the comparison.
So on that topic, we kind of find out about this Magnus and how he was a reinvented, Nazi refugee. My first read, I was kind of like, wasn't there just a Nazi in pulp? I did chat with Skip a little bit at one point before this show, and he was saying he appreciated the kind of historical aspect of it and giving that historical tale a new life. So you want to start off on that aspect of the story, Skip?
Yeah, sure. Because I kind of felt the same way, like kind of here, because before I read the book, Nalo and I were talking about it, and he he didn't want to spoil something for me, but I don't mind spoilers, so he told me about that aspect. And at like the second that he said Nazi, I was like, yeah, we just kind of broached that in pulp, like you really want to bring. And then Nalo told me the rest, the background about how he had like weaseled his way out and gone down into like parts of South America and stuff like that to kind of reinvent himself and then come back up through the South, through Mexico. And which makes sense now. He's in Southern California. I was like, okay, all that makes sense. And I had been doing some, just like I'm always interested in history. So this is a story about 6 weeks ago that I kind of learned about a number of like Nazi party members going from Germany and kind of taking that route. And I was like, oh wow, that was really interesting. So I appreciated the fact that Brubaker did make it a story that's not as much touched when it does come to like the Nazi parts of history and whatnot. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so Ash, you were saying that about this cult and Magnus is able to kind of control people. Breen, you were also saying, I think Fatal was one of your least favorite Brubaker books, but in that one it kind of speaks on to some occult Nazi power as well. So to you both, do you see any connection between that this guy was a former Nazi and his ability to kind of create cults in the modern day?
It's been a while since I've read Fatal, so I'd have to reread that to be able to make an apt comparison.
I think what was interesting about that, and Ash has a page of it up, but it's basically stated that since Magnus, what did he change his name to? Magnus Eriksson. Since he had kind of gone through that new identity that he had created for himself, he took aspects of what he learned from Hitler and kind of being over there, and his cadence of how he'd speak, even the like starting off low and composed, and then eventually escalating to the point of being like emotionally unstable and whatnot, and with the passion that he has in him about the things that he's talking about, and those are parts of the things that were so alluring to those studio heads and those people with money, saying, hey, my power and how I kind of how this guy came at them is what made even millionaires with all this power and money kind of underneath his paw.
One thing I can point out from both Recklesses is that the quote unquote big bad is something that's like so abstract and like conspiratorial. So meaning at the end of Reckless, when he catches the guy, whatever, he's like, nah, man, I work for the company. Like, you're in some CIA shit. And here it's like, dude, you're in some like post-Nazi occult shit.
Yeah. Like the less beaten path. Like I like that.
Kind of tell us that stuff is out there.
Yeah, and since it's not always as touched on, like it's a little more refreshing to get like that take and get some layers. And honestly, I know this is something that we kind of talked about, how the previous Reckless book was a little more complex and this twists and turns and stuff like that. I'll be honest, quite a few times, even when we covered it, I remember us kind of trying to like go back over things and make sure we had it right. That is something that I think he might have taken feedback from on this book, and that why it was maybe a little more straightforward. I didn't have nearly as many questions as which events happened which, and who betrayed who betrayed who this time around. It was more of a straightforward book. That still required me to do a little bit of like searching, and I still went back a few pages a few times. So I enjoyed the homework that he gave me, but this time it felt a lot more like first trimester instead of like the third trimester.
Right. Did it feel like there was a lot less ambiguity than normally Brubaker throws in his books? Right? Like in the criminal series, we kind of know who the quote unquote heroes of the stories are, but they're not exactly good people. And so there's more ambiguity, more gray areas and stuff. In this book, I mean, Ethan Reckless, he goes to some extremes to dispense justice or whatever, but it's pretty clear Ethan Reckless, Lin Tran, I mean, they're the good guys. These other people were just evil scum of the earth, Charles Manson types. Like, no gray area. This pretty very clear. That was, at least to me, that was my take.
Definitely.
Well, something that I would bring up is maybe we'll all have a different take once all 3 books are out, or however many there will be. And seeing this as a bridge, so Ash, you've been saying how much characterization, backstory we got in the first one. Everyone's kind of feeling this one's kind of bleak. Maybe in retrospect, we'll see this as kind of a serious transitional phase for Ethan Reckless, because at the end, he's out on this hunt, as we see, right? He's ready to get anybody who saw this film or paid money to get it. And the preview at the end of the actual hardcover says, look for the next Reckless Thrill Ride in October, destroy all monsters. And there's a lot of violence going on the cover. So for all we know, this kind of sets up whatever is going to happen in this third arc, where maybe in the time that's passed, he's been out there just sniping people off left and right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
go
ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh, that's something that I didn't want to drag. I didn't want to make the first kind of segment that we had feel like it was dragging on, but that's something that I caught from this when we were talking about development. The first time around in the first book, there is a very distinct, very intentional kind of set thing made that he has this number, people call him, and he does the jobs for money most of the time. And then like this time around, we did see that he took a paid gig, but that was short. The gig that took like the most time, he from the gate he wasn't doing it for money. Like it, so in a way, and he's 15 years older. Brubaker makes it a point to say, hey, I intentionally made this dude like 15 years older than me, and also, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Real quick, Skip, that was my point of the characterization. Like, what is his motivation? Why does he do this case for no money and everyone's telling him to turn back? And then we see in the third volume, he's on some sort of rampage, and we see it at the end of this book too.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the points that I was picking up. Is I do see a progression. He's older. We see him donating more of his time to things where he's not even getting paid for. And then I also believe that we see him get more gruesome and more vindictive in his methods, like Nalo said, especially towards the end of the book. And then we get this title, that we saw on the little poster, that he was looking at inside of the book. We get this title, Destroy All Monsters, where it sounds like, to touch on something that Ash said, we may get a far more Charles Bronson than the Magnum PI, version of Ethan in this next book, and we are seeing development along the way.
I think the next book's going to be like Born Identity, and like his handler friend, that Breen, you said that was really close. He'll probably be trying to like call him back home because he's gone like too rogue.
That would be interesting.
Interesting. I don't know about
kind
the
of take
whole
us back to
doing
the source.
this job for free. I mean, he was seeing Lynn, like he was in a relationship with her.
But everyone was telling him to turn back every direction, and then he made it to the end, and they showed him what he shouldn't have seen. And then what was his reward? He showed it to the woman, and she was so disturbed she left him forever.
Yeah, that's the bleak part about this book. People talk about this, but to me, all of Ed Brubaker's books are kind of bleak, but they kind of work for me because they're typically about criminals, and it's like, and I've always talked about how I kind of like in an Ed Brubaker book, everyone gets what they deserve. And so you may have the, protagonist of the story and you're rooting for them because they're the protagonist, but you know that they're a criminal. Like it doesn't make sense for them to get off scot-free and stuff. So Brubaker usually has some sort of tragic ending for them. And you can kind of walk away and feel like, okay, yeah, you kind of deserve that. Like, but here, like Ethan is helping this woman. He's doing good things. I mean, he's not a saint, but he's definitely not like a criminal or anything.
But I think it sets it up that here he's doing it for her, and by the end,
and I think he does what he does.
Book, I think he's going to be doing it for some justified abstract reason.
Maybe. What I'm saying is, I think Ethan does what he does because he is somewhat of a good guy, right? And remember, in the first book, they talk about, the explosion that he was in, kind of like dulled not his senses, but like he doesn't feel pain the same way anymore, both physically and emotionally. So I kind of see the whole thing with when he shows Lynn that he doesn't understand what she's going through. Like he's like, yeah, this is pretty ugly. Here, you should probably see it. And she just like can't take it. She's like, I can't be with the man who showed me this thing. And at the end, he kind of like rationalizes it, but you can kind of tell like he doesn't fully relate to it, you know. And he just lives a cold, hard life. And Lynn was.
Why do you guys think maybe Breen? Because I haven't heard from you.
Breen's
Why do you
AFK.
think that Greed's not here anymore? Or whatever. Anyone who wants to talk, why do you think someone would volunteer to be in a film like that?
Okay, Skip.
Oh no, go ahead, Bree.
No, I was going to comment on what we had been talking about real quick. Was her leaving Ethan as a result of this? It wasn't. I didn't tell you because he was the one that showed it to her. She came over from, what was it, Vietnam?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And she lived with an American family, and her sister that meant the world to her, abandoned her in her mind, I'm sure, when she ran off to Hollywood. Met a gruesome end, and she will always associate the closure of that with Ethan. So I think that's because he made it a point to say that she went home, married a man of her race, and just went. I think Ethan represented the death of the American dream for Lynn, and she went back home. As far as why anybody would volunteer to be in a snuff film, I would say a lot of drugs. And I'm not being glib. I mean, I think yeah. People just get so wrapped up in the whole cult and the lifestyle that goes with it, which I'm sure is, said lots of drugs. I mean, you'd have to be so completely messed up to agree. If you do agree to be the one that dies in one of those, and now a lot of things about snuff films is you didn't agree, and that's what makes them so, taboo on the black market or whatever. But I would say but in her case, it seemed like she was just going along with it, and I'm guessing, like I said, she just wasn't in control of her thoughts or actions anymore.
I have a slightly different take about the snuff film question. And I'm not 100% sure that this was a little bit more ambiguous. The more I thought about it, I was thinking, I think that her sister got involved in this cult, completely got so far away from who she was. Because one of the things that they talked about, her sister was like, she was this good person, right? When she came to the States, like, she was so welcoming and protected her and all these things. And then she went to Hollywood and just got poisoned, figuratively speaking, but, from all the just decadence and evil that's there. And she got to the point where she got involved in this cult. And I think there was probably something inside her that kind of understood that she was lost and there was no way out. And that this was the only way out for her. And I think that, and again, I could be reading into it, and this is one of the things I love about Brubaker, because he doesn't just tell you for certain one way or the other, but part of me is led to believe that this was sort of like, yeah, I let myself get killed on this film, and my suffering ends, like suicide by film type thing. Like, she was done. She just didn't have any life left in her. And they talk about how in the film, when she gets killed, like, she doesn't even cry out or anything. Like, it's like she just completely accepts it. And that's my interpretation of that. I think there's something to be said there. And that is really bleak.
Yeah, I got a lot of kind of the normal beats and stories that we hear of people that get caught up in, like, kind of any of those types of situations, whether it's anytime people are looking for fulfillment and they get caught up in, like, with the wrong people, so to speak. So whether it's gangs whether it's, you know, the occult, like whether it's like you know, MLMs, like whatever the scenario, there's always something that is being offered that's supposed to cure whatever lack that person has. And usually, and sometimes it starts off like, hey, you know, do you want to be this successful thing? Do you want to be a millionaire if it's MLM? Do you want to be a Hollywood superstar if it's, you know, if it's you know, if it's again Hollywood and acting in films and stuff like that? And that just happened to be her poison. I do appreciate how it was set up though, that she was someone who was very interested in pop culture, and there was even that that little moment where it was Lynn and Maggie, and they were watching the movie together, and she was talking about gosh, how am I forget? He was in the Winter Soldier movie. The older gentleman,
Rob Redford.
Robert Redford, and you know, and she was like, "Oh, he's too old for you," you know, like, and all that stuff. So it was already. I like how it was seeded that she was kind of, you know, interested in that, and kind of it, you know, from afar. Again, Hollywood doing what Hollywood does, it had already kind of got some of its clutches into her, and then unfortunately, she was never able to pull away. You know, even in this case, to save her own life.
Yeah, it's in a real quick side thing. I think it's interesting that the Robert Redford thing, because I totally see Ethan as Robert Redford. Just
from the movie Brubaker.
I haven't seen Brubaker. I haven't seen Brubaker yet, but Robert Redford in this time period in 1985 would be the same age as Ethan. And I just if you were gonna make a movie and you could cast anyone and you could get Robert Redford from 1985, I think it would be the perfect casting. It just feels right to me, and I don't know. Again, I could be reading into it, but I think Brubaker was hinting at things.
Yeah, could be. Nalo, did you were you able to give your take on why you felt like someone might kind of give themselves over in such a way?
Did we lose?
No, it
Oh,
baffles
no,
me.
no.
I can only kind of combine. I can only really kind of combine all your guys' takes. It kind of baffles me. One, a lot of drugs. Two, being so dejected, and three, just kind of, you know, being half brainwashed, half just wanting to get out of it. I can't think of anything else because it is very bleak.
Totally.
I'm more also, you know, concerned on who are these people that were buying this, and why do they want to buy that? Just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Another
Yeah,
thing that was
definitely.
bleak for me, real quick, I got that page up. This girl Lynn is probably the most wholesome girl that I've read in a Brubaker book thus far. Every other girl, I mean, I like his female characters. They're great. But usually they have something twisted about them. They have some skeletons in the closet. There's things about them that just aren't right. But Lynn is just like a good girl. She's a librarian. And she had something really crappy happen to her. And then she ends up leaving just because of the tragedy and going nothing, not because she's messed up, not even because necessarily Ethan messed. Like, it's just that felt to me, I was like, oh, this sucks. Like, no one deserves this. Like, every other time I always can like at least point fingers and be like, yep, I mean, that's what happens when you fall in love with a con artist, you know, or something. Like, you know, you can't do that here. You're like, oh, this is a good person. They didn't do anything wrong.
I mean, it just shows that that there are these kind of like black holes in space and time in our society, and you know, one of them is L.A. So a young, attractive girl who moves there to be an actress falls into some dark stuff, and people who used to be Nazis kind of also gravitate to that place to scoop those people up.
Yep, definitely. And I what I do like about it, like in a, I guess, poetic injustice sort of way, is that you know, Lynn had already gone through so much tragedy from her childhood up until now. Even though what Breen said about, you know, like Ethan being a part of her closure for a very traumatic part of her life, and that kind of really being the reason that she left, it sounds like Ethan Reckless, you know, as good as he means, because I still don't think he's some great person, but as good as he means, it was best that Lynn did get as far away from him as she could.
Yeah,
Or
he
her,
could have just hidden the results from her.
Yeah,
You know?
that was really weird when I was reading the book, and he's like, you get to the scene where he's showing her the movie, and I'm like, what are you doing?
That's why I think that it's setting it up for the next arc of Destroy All Monsters, and like that he's just like heartless. He's like, you have to see this. There's evil. I'm gonna go end this evil for this movie, and I'm gonna go find the rest of the evil.
Yeah, Pulp 2.0, but in the 90s.
Yeah, dude, we're gonna be in some raves, some popping some ecstasy.
Yeah,
He's
someone's
doing, like,
gonna
old
spike
man
Ethan's
reckless.
drink.
Old
Yeah,
man
old
reckless.
man.
He's like at an Aphex Twin party.
But seriously, guys, I mean,
Looking
think
for
about
some
this.
woman.
You are investigating your girlfriend. Your girlfriend lost her sister 8 years ago. You go investigate, find out she joined some Satan cult, and then was on film. They made a film of her getting stabbed to death. So you find the film, you kill the people that did it, you come back, you're like, okay, I found out what happened to your sister. Here, watch this film. Dude, like,
You should have just said like the case was too hard. Sorry, it's lost. It's a lost
you
cause.
could just say, look, she got murdered by some Satanists. I'm so sorry. That's enough. You had to show it. She can't ever unsee that. Like, what I wouldn't want to see that even if it was a stranger.
That's almost reckless behavior on his part.
Someone would say that is so.
Maybe that's why this is called reckless.
Yeah, well, Ethan lives up to his name, that's for sure. But yeah, I can. It seems like in some ways he's softening up, to like, some of the good people of the world, and then other ways he's growing even harder, or more hardened towards, the people that are, really taking advantage of, these good people in the world, and I think what else is interesting is well, I don't know. I don't want to get to that. Well, maybe we'll save that for like one of the last things.
Well,
Word about
I think
that
we've
time.
definitely
Okay.
stretched this book pretty thin. So if you got something to say, bring it up.
Okay. Well, the progression of him, he himself starting off as like kind of like a hippie, kind of kid himself or whatever, and then going through what he went through to where he was put in a position where it's like work for us or just be behind bars. So then he did work for the FBI and got his training, and then went through what he went through with the whole bomb and trying to tip those people off when he was undercover because he did care, and kind of the road that led him down. He's been in a lot of twists and turns himself. So like Nalo keeps saying, it seems like it's gonna, it's been a progression. There was so much that progressed for him in the first book, and then we see he continues to kind of change and trend towards the direction, like I said, of kind of softening up to maybe the people that remind him of a time where he was careless instead of reckless, back then, and try, and like it even says in the book, trying to grab on to a portion of that makes you feel, that connects you to those times. And then every time it seems like he gets a fiber of it, within his index and, finger and thumb, he can never hold on to it, for one reason or another. And maybe that's how he loses his entire grip, and brings him to the last book.
Do you think the title Friend of the Devil has maybe multiple references, and maybe that part of that reference is that there's a little bit of the devil in Ethan, and that's sort of what
I don't think it's in Ethan. I think based off Fatal, which actually like has the devil in it, and like the underbelly of like Fade Out that's explored. I think it's more on people who befriend the devil, like the cult members, the woman who decides to be in the snuff film.
Well, that's why I said multiple. I'm not
murdered.
Sure, and I'm not necessarily discounting that, but I'm wondering if there's maybe multiple meanings in that title, because I can kind of see a little bit in the sense of from Lynn's point of view. She kind of made friends with Ethan, and I mean she got some closure, but man, it's some traumatic closure.
Good point. It's a good point. Yeah, maybe for her, Ethan is the devil.
Right? Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like a little bit of because Ethan is, we point out he's not a good guy. I mean,
He's
not
the good guy for the reader.
yeah, for sure. I mean, he does good things, but he will kill people. Like, he's not exactly going around like, oh, I need to redeem you. No, he's like, you're a scum, killing you.
Yeah, I mean, and then on the flip side, if we look at Lynn, I would, where I wouldn't sit up here and dispute that, but I would say if we're looking at Lynn's relationships, her sister became the friend of like a devil in the flesh.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Like I see. That's what I was as we're talking about this book. I'm just starting to, like, my brain is thinking, and I'm starting to see, like, oh, different meanings in this and different takes, and it just kind of dawned on me, like, the multiple ways you could interpret that title.
Yeah, my main one obviously was like the villain, because literally he was a Satanist, and she was in a movie called, Sirens of Satan. So that, like, to me, that's the biggest one. It's pretty straightforward after you've read the book. Before you've read the book, you're not entirely sure, minus seeing, the lady sitting there in the, in the little occult circle or whatever. But yeah, like, I think you can look at some things and see that there's a little more layers. But I'll be honest with you, when I'm reading the books, majority of the time, I try not to read so much into it, and then I think more of it after the fact, because sometimes I can take my own self out of the book trying to, like, read between the lines too much. I kind of take things for face value, and I try to keep myself within the story with it, like, especially something like this where the lead character is, like, narrating it to you. I try to keep myself in Ethan's shoes until I get out of the story. Then after the fact, I see. And most of the time, I end up sticking, a lot of my stuff stays closer to the story itself, especially regarding Brubaker.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I think we're kind of.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much stretched this book thin, so I think we're coming to the end of the stream. I'll hand it over to you, Ash.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Comic Crack, who's a name that I'm not familiar with. So if this is your first time, welcome. And if it's not your first time, welcome anyway. He says, speaking of monsters, anyone... Or sorry, that's not the quote I was reading. What did he... I scrolled too fast. I just ruined it. This is what happens. I just need to leave Nala in charge. He says, I saw the movie Destroy All Monsters. It didn't look anything like this. That's the comment I was looking for. Did anyone... do you think we'll see Godzilla in the next book? Wouldn't that be a twist?
I hope
for
not.
Ed Brubaker book.
Friend of the Godzilla.
I prefer dry realism and films where nothing really happens.
Destroy all monsters. That would just be. I'm very eager to see the next book, because the title alone, Destroy All Monsters. I really like the pulp sort of style, these pulp novels, this pulp fiction style books that this comes from. Books like Destroyer, the movies that we've talked about, like the Bronson films and stuff like that. I'm anticipating that this will probably be the most violent of all the books.
It reminds me of the end of Cruel Summer, where they are attacking the stadium with the gas masks.
Yeah, on the cover you can see. I mean, his theater that he owns looks like it's getting bombed.
Under siege. Maybe the monsters are coming after him.
So I have a feeling, and the girl, maybe this time his assistant is the girl that's under threat, because there's always a damsel in distress, right? This very noir style of Brubaker. I don't know if he's written a book.
I would like to see a non-binary character be in distress for once. Like...
Shut up. Oh, you're killing me. I'm just wondering, maybe if it's like something closer to home. He loses his theater, everything goes down, and it's just one massive bloody tragedy, and everyone dies. I could see
like Hamlet. It'll be like Hamlet. Everyone dies.
Like Hamlet.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead.
All right, well, folks, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you guys for posting your stuff in chat. We did get a couple suggestions for future books for us to do. If you are listening to this after the fact and you want to give your suggestion, you can just put it in the comments below. Or if you're listening now and you just forgot to do it, same thing. Definitely would like to take your considerations and what you'd like to see us do. Here's a list of books up on the screen for you right now. So it's basically anything that's Ed Brubaker that's from the independent line. We're not going to be covering any of the Batman books.
I vote for Fade Out, for sure.
What's that?
I vote Fade Out.
Fade Out?
Fade out, fade out, fade out,
We're for
fade
sure
out.
going to get to Fade Out. Whether that's the next one or not will be...
Fade out, fade out, fade.
3 against 1. 3 against 1.
Fade out wins. Fade out wins.
Unlike these bozos, I'm trying to take the audience into account. But here's some books that give you an idea of what could be suggested. Keep in mind that we're not going to probably be able to do in one video. We learned the hard way from Cruel Summer that if the story is too big, we might have to break it up into multiple videos. So a Fade Out, for example, is 3 times the size of one Reckless book.
Which is smaller than all the other ones left.
No, we got all those criminal books. There's a lot of criminal books left. Fatale is a big one. But just to be out there, just so you know, we're not going to be able to do the Marvel or DC books unless it's there's a couple of DC books that he did that were part of like the Wildstorm that have more of an indie feel, like Scene of the Crime. That might be available to do. But anyways, please give out your feedback. We'd like to hear from you. Bad Weekend is something that we'll probably eventually do, but a little bit down the road, just because I already did it on one of my other shows kind of recently. So it feels kind of weird to do that now. So yeah, there you go. Do you guys have any final words before we get out of here?
No, I'm good.
Skip wants bitcoins. All right.
Alan wants to give bitcoins. I think I enjoyed this book more than the previous one.
Really?
And
Cool.
yeah. And I really enjoyed the ride. So thank you, Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips and Jacob Phillips and whoever did the lettering. Oh, there was really one small, really minor thing. I liked how some of the word bubbles, like the speaking, I like how like some of them interacted with the environment that was around. There was like one where they were talking around like a bookshelf, and like one of the lines from the book like kind of dipped down imperfectly into the word bubble a little bit, and I like that.
Oh yeah, I know what you're saying. All right, folks.
That's all.
There we go. That has been Criminal. Sorry, it wasn't Criminal. That's a Reckless story, which feels like a criminal, but not so much. That's Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips. We're going to be back roughly 2 weeks-ish. It's not a regular show, but it's usually on a Wednesday. We hope you can join us. Stay tuned. Read more Ed Brubaker. This is some of the best stuff. Even the least great Ed Brubaker book is leaps and bounds above most anything else you're going to read. I have not been disappointed once since I have been introduced by these fine gentlemen. So thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you next time. Say goodnight, kids.
Good night, kids.
Night, kids.
Bye, kids.